I'm about to meet Robin Hauser, who is a producer-director who did a fantastic TED Talk on women and being leaders versus being likable. And she's just entered the Zoom room now, so let's have a chat with her. Great to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
This meeting came together because of an amazing TED Talk that you did back in 2019, I'm learning. And it just really spoke to me. And I think that your message is really innovative when it comes to women in the workplace, particularly male-dominated workplaces. I mean, I don't know many industries that aren't male-dominated. So I think it applies to all sectors of industry. Do you want to summarize what you said in your TED Talk?
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell you first what led up to this TED Talk. It was actually originally a TEDx talk in Marin County, which is Northern California. And they had approached me. I had done an actual real TED Talk in 2017. And that's, for anybody that's ever done one of those talks, it's a wonderful but sort of grueling experience, right? I mean, it's like being in final exams or something. So I learned a lot about writing and speech giving. They set you up with a coach. TEDx is a little bit more casual, but I still had a little bit of, PTSD from the first TED Talk. So when they came back to me and said, would you do a talk for us in Marin County, which, by the way, had almost as large of a in-person audience, right? They gather like 850 people, so it was still really big, and then it is, of course, broadcast. But I resisted a little bit. I just wasn't sure I wanted to undertake that undertaking again. So finally, they came back to me and they said, "Listen, applications are due today at 5. Would you please just write something down?" And I had a little bit of time before a presentation I was giving at the University of Indiana, and I sat down and I just wrote about, really off the cuff, about the little microaggressions of sexism, like modern day sexism, and what it is that is so frustrating about it, because it's not blatant as much anymore. It's these little microaggressions that just add up, right? So I wrote that and I submitted it, and it was accepted. But then as I started the review process with my team at TEDx, they very, very well-intended, really good coaches, 2 men and a woman. And in the first meeting, the woman wasn't able to be present. So the 2 men had read my script and weren't quite sure what to do with it. And they said, "Well, Robin, do you have any more like egregious examples of sexism? Like, we don't want to put pressure on you, but like, was there ever any sexual harassment, or did anybody ever, was just maybe some more egregious examples?" And I said, "Well, the whole point of this is that it's not always an egregious example. It's the microaggressions that lead up to sexism." They were like, okay, well, so they went with me, they allowed, and we worked on the script, of course, over a number of months. And then when I gave the talk, a lot of women in the room, there was a standing ovation, right? And when I walked off stage, these 2 men gave me a hug and they were like, "That was great." They go, "Oh my God, the audience loved it." As though they were really completely surprised. And then when, say, within a month or two, I can't remember when actually, but a little bit of time later, it had gotten so many views that TED came to, approached and said, "Listen, we'd like to put this up on the major TED platform because it's getting a lot of attention." And since then, it's had over 2 million, almost 2,080,000 views. So what's fascinating about this is that women understand it. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a woman that's in the Middle East or in Southeast Asia, in Europe, in the UK, in the US, in Africa. I'm getting emails and comments on LinkedIn from all over the world, women that identify with this. And the premise is that, first of all, it's the little things that add up, right? That make women feel, whether there's a comment such as, once I was at a cocktail party and I asked someone what they did for a living. It was a man, and he said to me, "Oh, I'm in fintech." And I said, "Oh, really? What type?" And he looks at me and he says, "Oh, it's complicated." And I thought to myself, okay, this is interesting. If I were a man, would you tell me that your profession is complicated? Or would you trust the fact that if you explained it, I might be able to figure it out? But his unconscious bias that just because I'm a woman, I probably wouldn't understand the intricate details of his fintech company. And it's possible that I wouldn't, but would he have said that to a man? And by the way, I'm perfectly comfortable asking follow-up questions to the point where I would have understood what he did, right? But then the likability dilemma, and this is something that I learned about from a brilliant woman at Harvard whose name is Iris Bonet. And Iris explained to me this sort of dilemma that as a woman gains sort of traction within the workplace and becomes more of a leader, as she becomes more competent, she becomes less likable. And not just to men, but to men and women. And the idea is that, why would this be the case? Well, this is the case because when women take leadership roles, they take on personality traits that society in general associates with leaders, which happen to be male traits, right? So decisive, competent, assertive, strong. And when women take on those traits, we are violating gender norms in our society for what a woman should be, which is more kind, nurturing, helpful, supportive, differential. So by taking on these roles, we become less likable because we're not fitting into the stereotype of what most of us think a woman should be.
Yeah. Your TED talk really struck me. And you gave that fintech example. And I don't know how many times I've experienced that myself where in my industry, as in engineering, technology, it's just assumed that we won't understand. And so I've almost become immune to that. I almost find it endearing, which is weird because I'm so used to having to accept that certain characters just will never believe that we have the capability to be in that sector and lead and even just be equal, Yeah. So I've become immune to it. I know those types well. I don't take it personally anymore. But what are we trying to achieve? Are we, as women who maybe have endured this, or women who are now starting to experience this by going into the workplace, are we trying to train women up to deal with it? Or are we saying it's okay to be aggressive and decisive and all the things that you mentioned?
Well, that's such a great question. And I think this is part of, the dilemma, right? So it's one thing if somebody makes let's just assume that it was innocent, right? Let's just assume that the person didn't mean to be demeaning to me at the cocktail party, but it was just this unconscious bias that I, as a woman, probably wouldn't understand his very complicated financial, background or job. Does it really matter in that right then and there how I was treated? In most cases, maybe I'll make a joke like, try me, maybe I'll understand, or maybe I'll just ignore it and go talk to somebody else. Where this does matter is if you're in the workplace, and let's say somebody like that with those biases happens to be the person that could offer you a promotion or not. And whether you're just the fact that you're a woman and you're the next person up for a promotion, his unconscious biases or blatant biases, who knows, but can persuade him to either hire you for that position, give you the promotion or not. And that's where this becomes really dangerous, right? And then women begin to believe the stereotypes as well about themselves, and they might not even put themselves out there for that job. They might not believe that they actually qualify for that job when they're very qualified. Men have more confidence, more, it has to do with testosterone and stuff. They believe they qualify for a job if they only have maybe 6 of the qualifications out of 10, and a woman needs to have 10 out of 10, and even then she's, unsure. But
that's the study you talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, you asked another part of the question, so remind me what you were.
Well, no, I mean, leading on from what you've said, I just, I guess I'm trying to clarify in my mind where we're heading with this, because my career in engineering or associated with engineering has spanned 2 decades, and I've really seen change in the sense that when I first graduated into the industry, I was the only woman and the only woman of color. And it was just a sea of a very homogenous type of group in the industry. And I've watched women be described as men in drag, of the few that were in the industry, men in drag.
It's
And
terrible.
I've seen women adopt very masculine behaviors to be one of the boys. But then as time has rolled on, I've seen women juggle parenthood and fight for flexible working hours and go from dressing down in the office and wearing baggy clothes, which I was requested to do, to then, getting their hair done and painting their nails and wearing high heels and actually not feeling bad about that. So I have seen change. And I guess what I would love to know is, are we trying to convince others that it's okay to just be yourself at work? Or are we trying to get women to change themselves to fit in?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I've seen somewhat of a shift in since I've given this talk. Right after I gave the talk, I was in India actually, and I was on a panel, and there was a young Indian woman that asked, what can I do to fit in? I'm one of the few women on the engineering team, and I really want to fit in. What can I do? And one of the more senior women said, you should take up drinking. I know if you don't drink, but you can fit in better with them. Maybe get something like just a beer and drink it slowly, but that will help you integrate yourself into this group after work. Maybe pick up golfing or pick up, and I was appalled. I was appalled, and I didn't want to insult the culture. But as I listened to this, I thought, no, this poor young woman. She doesn't have to drink to fit in with the guys if that's not something that she wants to do. And even in the US, I've heard numerous women tell me, and this is, let's just say this is 10 years ago, women my age or older that have said, well, I did go take golf lessons so that I wouldn't be left out, so that I could join the men. And, I've sacrificed nights away from my children to go out with the guys drinking. But that sometimes is where decisions are made. And so you need to keep yourself in that room. So I am not an advocate of that. If you play golf and you want to hang with the guys, I think that's terrific. But what is important is that, number one, big important decisions can't be made in the men's locker room, right? These need to be made in spaces where women are allowed to be. Two, I think this is easier for me to say at my age than it would be if I were 27 and new in a workforce. But your job is not to be likable. Your job is to, whatever it is, to manage, to direct, to lead. It's not to be likable. When you go home, you can be likable to your spouse, to your partner, to your children. That's when you need to be likable. You'd be likable to your friends, right? Be a good listener. And I'm not saying you need those qualities in the workplace too, but you cannot control what other people think about you. And if your job is to be an effective leader, then that needs to lead you, and that's what you need to be. And you cannot worry about whether you're likable. I don't think most men are worried about whether they're likable or not.
That's an interesting point, because so many decisions are made in the locker room, and they're made because there is a tight community. And so what I'm finding and what I've witnessed is that in order to be part of that community, you have to be really good at your job. So what ends up happening is a lot of women go above and beyond. So if they're going for a job, they will be even more qualified than the best man of the pickings. And so what ends up happening is you're constantly just proving yourself. It just becomes this unfulfilling prophecy, because your only way in is to just be brilliant versus getting a job because you're liked. And I find that really difficult, because I personally, I'm in engineering, I'm really highly qualified, but was I given opportunities and was I given open doors because of my qualifications, or just because I would fit into the group? I'm really aware that, I think the reason why it's so difficult to talk about this subject is because it's so multi-layered. So you've got the likability, you've got, are you actually qualified to do the job? You've got experience, you've got networks and connection, you've got cultural differences, and I think the reason why one of the many reasons why I found your TED Talk so fascinating is because you start to chip away at this giant boulder of issues that are all lumped together. And likability, I think, is a major issue, but then so are many other things. And I just wonder whether, talking about it is really important, and awareness about it is really important, but what are we actually going to do about it? Like, where does the solution?
Yeah, and that's the thing, as you said, if you even have to worry about why you're in the room that you're in, right? Why you were hired, was it because you just are a quota, filling a quota, or because of merit? Everybody wants to believe that they were hired for merit. And hopefully, that's the case. What I believe is, regardless, if you get that opportunity, if you get in the room, don't look back, just grab it, but be awesome. And I think that's the problem. The problem is that women, as you mentioned, women have to be better than the best, right? In order to be acknowledged. Because if you're the minority, if you're the only or the one of few in your group, on your team, in your org, then the problem is, if you make one mistake, you're going to represent an entire sort of culture. You're going to represent all of women of color, and that's a problem. There isn't a reason. I have literally interviewed men that have told me, "Oh, I hired a woman onto my board. I'll never do that again. Her daughter got sick, and I didn't see her for 2 meetings." Yeah, and I'm just thinking, this was before COVID, so didn't have the opportunity to. It wasn't as common to join virtually, but what he said was so shocking to me, because maybe he just wanted an excuse to not have to worry about finding women on the board. He would rather take some of his fraternity brothers and pack the board with that. But I think what he was, but the fact that he was generalizing about all women because of this one experience, and I've heard people say that about, people of color as well. It's shocking. I don't necessarily believe in quotas. If quotas help push a company to think more, to look more broadly, and to interview a greater, breadth of humanity, then that's good. That's important. But I believe that people should be hired for merit. And there's this assumption that if you're adding diversity, that you have to lower qualifications is absurd. It's absurd. Yeah. The only time that I think that there are certain, ceilings that prevent, say, women from getting on boards is if we all know that it's harder for women to get, because of the glass ceiling, it's harder for women to get up to the C-suite. More women leave the workforce, not always because of children, but because of these microaggressions. They just finally get exhausted by all of it. But if it's harder for women to have, say, 15 years experience in the C-suite, and that's the qualification that these large Fortune 500 companies are looking for a woman on the board, they're going to have less candidates because not as many women qualify. So I do believe that you need to reconsider these strict sort of, qualifications that you have to have women on board, because women just don't have the same opportunity to be in the C-suite, right? So maybe in that, but that does not mean that you're not going to get a woman or a person of color that are equally, if not more qualified to be on that board.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to a conclusion that I keep returning to over and over again, which is, as an individual trying to make their way in the world, building their career, trying to be awesome, I think the take-home message is just be the best at what you're doing. You know, just really kick ass, basically. Like,
Yeah.
if you decided that C-suite is where you want to get to, just stay focused on the goal and keep going. And I have seen a change where the result is positive in the end. I've seen women who do want to be mothers, but then want to return to work. I'm not saying it's easy, but they are doing it. And I think now, with the awareness of ED&I issues, companies are starting to get a bit more flexible on that and are loosening this need to be a brotopia, because that's what we need. I mean, it's becoming so obvious that brotopias don't work. We need inclusive workplaces. You need the balance of skills, perspectives, experience.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I've talked to teams, engineers. It's interesting because I'll never forget, excuse me, being at a major company, and this man represented, he managed a team of maybe 45 engineers. And he said that before he watched my film Code Debugging the Gender Gap, which was all about the fact that there wasn't, especially this came out in 2015, there wasn't a lot of diversity in tech, and there still isn't as much. But at the time in Silicon Valley, it was really white male, right? And he said to me, I actually never even thought about it. He's like, I've never actually even thought about how many women are on my engineering team until I watched your movie. And he said, I'm not happy about that. I feel a little shameful about it. But he then looked and he realized that there were 3 women out of, say, 40 engineers. And so he gathered them later to talk to them about what their experience was like. And he was shocked to hear, how difficult it was for them and how they started changing the way they were dressing and behaving and talking and everything just so that they could fit in. And so I thought that was really interesting because, and the words that I heard most often when a predominantly male audience watched Code Debugging the Gender Gap documentary was eye-opening. So it's not that they're trying to exclude women or trying to create this culture that is really toxic for women. It's that they've just never really had to even think about it, right?
Yeah.
For them, hey, they're with their bros. This is awesome. They're doing their thing. And yeah, if suddenly there's a woman in there that says, stop sharing pornography or, and take your feet off the desk, or can you clean up your pizza and beer cans? I mean, but there are other people on those teams that say, because obviously a woman on the team does not want to be the mother or the person in charge, right? That is not that woman's role. Inevitably, sometimes that's what they end up being. But I thought that was just really interesting that they actually hadn't even stopped to consider or to think or to even have empathy for the women that were on that team. But raising awareness in that way, I think, is important, because then suddenly, especially a manager can think about how they could make a better work environment for. And really what that leads to is retention. I mean, you just need retention of women. There's something that was called the posse effect, which stated that if you don't just bring in one woman or one person of color when they're going to be the majority or the minority, but really bring in, say, maybe 5 or 6 onto a team of 25 or something, like really trying to bring a posse of minorities onto a new team, because then they at least have each other. They're not feeling so isolated. And retention seems to be greater when they can create that.
Yeah, and I think education is so important, because from personal experience, when I, as a young 20-something-year-old, entered industry, I thought there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Like, I just didn't have social skills, or didn't know how to be cool, or whatever. Like, I felt really odd as an individual. And actually, what I discovered is that the majority of the people I worked with just did not know how to coexist with someone like me. So there was this like awkward, like, I don't know how to be around you. How do you act around a girl? Like, it was just awkward all round. And that's why I am quite interested by a lot of the sort of non-binary debates. Not interested because of my own personal preferences, but more interested that today's generation wants to do away with binary categories, because I think that would really help in the workplace, so that you're not like, oh gosh, you're a male, you're a female. It's more just like, we are fluid in that sense. I think that would really help with getting more inclusivity in the workplace. So
yeah, I think you're right. I think that's an interesting argument, but at the same time, will we ever get there? I mean, there's always going to be dynamics with women who identify, as women, and men who identify with men, and men having testosterone brains, women having estrogen brains. I mean, I don't know how we would ever get to the place where we could turn all that off. I mean, maybe there is.
Why can we not get to a place where men, okay, I'm not going to sound like an angry woman. Why can't we get to a place where women accept that men are different, and men accept that women are different, and that those differences, actually, this comes back to a phrase that I've coined, which is that we can make a difference through our differences.
Well, exactly.
Why can't we get to a place where our differences are actually points of opportunity, rather than, oh my gosh, you're different, and that alienation that comes with it?
Now, I'm 100% in agreement with you. This is something that I've actually talked about, in some public talks, is that we need to respect, and not just that, really appreciate our differences and what those differences can bring to the table. So, for instance, if a woman can read a room better, if a woman has more intuition, we've heard about that, right? This is estrogen brain has more, systemic empathy, this ability to sort of read a room. That can really, imagine just in a negotiation, right? So you're there, and there's two women on the team. It doesn't matter how many of each, but you have both genders and at that table. And a man walks away saying, I think that went well, because he feels good about how he delivered his argument in the negotiation. The woman, which is good, so that's testosterone brain. A woman is feeling the room, is seeing everything, is noticing how the other side is reacting, is being very intuitive. And she might come back saying, I think a couple people were convinced, and I think they might go with this, but I also saw a few that might not be, and I think we need to follow up and clarify, our points or whatever. So the fact that woman, was able to really pick up and read the room is a talent not uniquely to women, but that women have more sort of intuitively than men do. Again, maybe if a woman says, okay, I'm really not comfortable in this situation, driving the hard line, saying we're not going to do this deal unless we can make a deal for 3.2 million or whatever. And if she knows how she's going to be perceived as a ball buster and everything, if she's the one, then the team can work together and say, you know what, Michael might be the better person to deliver that final line, right? So I mean, we can work together by understanding what our differences are and how those differences can really help us in a certain situation.
Yeah. I think I don't know about other industries. I know that the engineering sector really suffers from not bringing different perspectives on board. And so, I was shocked last year. I was hosting an award ceremony. And normally the awards are given for the biggest, the tallest, the largest, like all these very like big sort of accolades of engineering projects. And last year they decided to scrap all of that and actually just awards based on the uniqueness of the project and its sustainability and just qualities that aren't quantifiable. We're not talking about the tallest or the largest or the longest or whatever. We're just talking about the impact. So it's a different way of measuring whether something is worthy of an award. But to me, that felt more feminine, for want of a better description. It felt more feminine, and all these kind of competitive hard goal oriented aspirations seem more masculine. And I feel like it's almost like bringing a balance of femininity and masculinity on board is almost diminishing the masculine. And that's why it's taking time to gain traction, because we're softening up essentially by bringing women on board. And I think there's a massive resistance to that. I'm saying all this because I just wonder whether the message you convey in your TED Talk could lead to change, or whether we're just highlighting a problem that will never change.
Well, I mean, I hate to think about that. I hate to believe that. I mean, what I do say toward the end of the talk is that really the way that we're going to get there is we have to redefine what it is to be likable. We have to redefine what it is to be a female leader, so that we stop violating the gender norms. And it's once we do that, once we're used to women being assertive, being competent, being decisive, that we're not going to judge her differently or dislike her because of that, right? And, as I say, sometimes this is subtle and unconscious. Sometimes we don't know why we don't like, a certain female leader, but we don't like her because she's taking on these male traits, right? Because seems aggressive or seems tough. And I think that once we get to a point in society where women don't feel like they have to where women don't feel like they have to take on male traits in order to be respected as a leader, then maybe we can make some change. Or when we as a society, and I think certain societies have done this better than others, but certainly in Western, society, I believe that we still expect a woman to be deferential and supportive and, not necessarily the assertive, sort of aggressive, if you will, leader. And even the fact that we, use those terms, I mean, we wouldn't use the word aggressive generally for a man. We would say, oh, he's strong. He's competent. He's strong. For a woman, you'd be like, gosh, she's kind of full of herself, because we don't. And I think that's a problem. But if we can redefine what it means to be a female leader or a leader in general, then I think that women are going to be able to more easily fit into that role without being judged. But the bottom line is, you just can't worry about it. And that's easy to say. So I was talking to a young woman not that long ago who said, I have the opportunity. My manager approached me and offered me the opportunity to be the manager of the engineering desk. And she said, but right now I really get along so well with my colleagues, and they're mainly men, but I really like them, and I get to go out with them. They bring me with them when they're going out for beers at the end of the day. And she says, I'm worried that if I take that management role, they're not going to like me anymore. And I wanted to take this young, 29-year-old and just shake her and say, oh my gosh, take that promotion. You have to, for not just for yourself, but for all of womankind, like seize that role, because you're being given an incredible opportunity and this is your career. And you're not in your career just to be liked, just to make friends. You're in your career to be effective, right, in that industry. So take that role and don't worry. If they respect you, which they will, if you're a good leader, they'll respect you, then they'll like you. And even if some people don't like you because they wanted that promotion, they wanted that position, there's nothing you can do about other people's feelings about you, really, can you?
Yeah.
Like somebody once said to me, what other people think about you is none of your business. And it took me a long time to understand exactly what they were saying. But now I think I finally understand it. We cannot control really how we're perceived, right? So the problem is, perception is stronger than intention. So even if we're intending to be a certain way, it's how we're perceived that really strikes people. So since we can't really control that, we just have to make sure in the workplace that we are doing the job we were hired to do and that we do it well, and not worry about what people think of us as we're doing that, if we're a good, effective leader.
Yes. I think that's such a great takeaway. And expanding on that, the role of women has really changed over the last few decades. And I guess we're both of that generation that knows that it's really important to just be all you can be. What I mean by that is, very early on in my career, I tried to be someone I wasn't. I tried to fit in. I tried to limit myself. I tried not to be too pretty, too smart, too this, because I just wanted to get by in the world and not be too extreme. I think times have moved on now where actually you should be all you can be, because things are changing so rapidly that actually being a woman that is able to be a mom, be a friend, be a wife, be a leader at work, be aggressive when it requires it, but be soft and kind and caring when that requires. Like, there's nothing wrong with being multidimensional. There was an era where being multidimensional confused people, but actually be all you can be. That's the message I think we should give to women. Don't worry about how people are judging you for that, which is exactly what you were saying. I just want to put.
No, I absolutely agree with you. So it's just convincing the younger women, new generations that are coming into the workplace, to really own that and be brave enough to take that on, because it's not always easy.
So what's on the horizon for you? Like, how are you hoping to take your message that was delivered in your TED Talk further forward?
Well, so I'm a filmmaker. I have not been in the corporate world for a long time. So a lot of that talk was based on just my personal experiences on how I have felt microaggressions, and it parlays into the corporate world well. And I used to be in the corporate world. But I'm making a film right now. I'm making a film about the rising trend of elective egg freezing and the future of fertility. So I'm really excited about that. I think infertility, as we know, 1 in 6 couples in the world suffer from infertility. So this is a big issue. We are out evolving evolution by waiting till our late 30s or mid 30s even to try to get pregnant. So that's fun. In my own way, I deal with this. I work with a lot of men. When I'm on set filming someone, I work with a lot of men. I have the privilege to interview people who are experts, very well studied in their field. And often they first look at me when I'm on the other side of the interview asking these questions. And, sometimes I'm highly respected. And other times I think they look at me like, who is she? Who is she to be asking me these questions? But at this point, I don't care how people perceive me. I care more about, I do. Let's be honest. If I'm being really honest, of course I care. I care a lot about how my friends and family think of me. But I just go in there when I'm doing my job and I interview, or I let my crew know what I want to do. I listen to everybody's perspective and then I make the ultimate decision. And if someone thinks that, I'm not as qualified because I'm a woman or whatever, well, so be it. There's nothing I can do to control that. And I may or may not hire that person again. I've had 1 or 2 conflicts on set, but generally I hire people who respect me, respect the work that I've done, respect me because I'm a woman, and I work really well with. But I definitely select a team carefully, to make sure that I am respected as a woman.
That really resonates with me because as an engineer who then started communicating engineering, I used to really care about what people thought. So much so that it held me back quite a lot. And as I've got older, I don't care what people think now, because generally the main message was, you're dumbing down engineering. But I now know that if I don't dumb down engineering, the problem of not enthusing young future engineers will persist. And so I dumb down engineering, or whichever way you want to describe it. I make engineering accessible in order to spark curiosity in future engineers. And there are many people that, judge me for doing that. But again, it's back to what we're saying. Like, I now know what my mission is and my purpose is. And once it's the same with probably the documentaries that you're making. Once you know what the key message is that you're trying to convey, it doesn't matter what people think. And people will think everything. And, everything in between, all over the spectrum of things, positive to negative. And I think that's the beauty of aging, is that you stop to care. You stop caring so much about how you are perceived, and you focus more on the end goal.
Yes, and the quality of work that we're doing, or that is so important. And so the big question is, how do we infuse that type of confidence into young women who are in the workforce, yes, or young women in general? And I think you're an amazing role model. And Sheeny, that is such an important thing to be. And I hope that, for whatever it's worth, I suffer from imposter syndrome as much as the next person, but whatever I can, again, and I'm just imparting knowledge that I have learned from other amazing women, right? And other amazing individuals in this world. So, but the more that we can try to inspire the younger generation of women, and by the way, inspire young men, yes, to view women in a different way and to respect their female colleagues, that is so important. I have a 28-year-old son, and I really believe, I have hope for that generation, because I see how he treats women. And I hope it's not just because I'm his mother, but I hope it's because he truly was brought up in a world where he understands and respects differences, and sees how, women can be effective, colleagues. And in fact, his boss is a woman, and he highly respects her, which is great. So am I hopeful that maybe as we grow as a society, that the older generations who were sort of inherently more sexist, that things are changing? I hope so. But I do also see that there's young people that, maybe aren't quite adapting this vision of equality. And is that due to sort of their own self-consciousness? I don't know. It's been interesting. Scott Galloway has written about this quite a bit. He's a professor at NYU. And what's happening now is that there have been so much effort put into trying to boost women in the workplace, right? Or boost women in general. So there's like women's societies and women's groups and women's forums. And every time you go, say, even to a university or wherever, you see a lot of efforts for just women gathering, right? To support and pump up women. Well, right now, a 15 or 16, 18-year-old man doesn't remember when women couldn't vote, doesn't remember, wasn't even alive when women couldn't get credit cards in their own name or couldn't take a mortgage by themselves. So what they've grown up with is being in a classroom where women are the smartest, where women are valedictorians, where women are getting jobs. We're not getting paid equally, but at least we're getting those jobs. And so they're confused about why women are getting all this attention. And young men in our society between, say, 18 and 25 are beginning to feel kind of lost. And as powerful and as important as this women's movement is, we cannot do that, to the demise of young men in our society. We need men to prosper also, because we need to, all of us together, be able to support each other. Women, we're never going to reach equality if we don't have men as allies. So yeah. It concerns me, sort of this trend of what's happening. And you hear a lot about what's happening with young men right now. They're sort of disenfranchised. A lot of them they're living at home. They don't want to go out and get a job. They're not interested in meeting women in, bars or social settings. They're not dating as much. They're relying on pornography. I mean, it's really a problem. And that is not the answer to finding, female equality in the workplace. We need our young men to feel healthy and masculine and valued as well. And we need them to respect women.
That's what I was saying about education. It's time to recalibrate what masculine is and recalibrate what feminine is, and actually make them equal in the sense that both bring qualities to the table. They're just different, and that's okay.
Yeah, respect our differences. Respect the differences.
Yeah.
Understand the value of bringing a woman onto the team or bringing a man onto the team. Because I don't believe in all women teams either. I mean, I think that you might be, depending on what product you're making or building or something, but I think that you might be losing something there too.
Yeah, and which is when you talked about the women's forums and the women's groups and the women's initiatives, that's why I stopped my podcast, because I just felt like, why are women talking to women? We all know this stuff. We just need people who are not like us to realize what we're going through. And that's another reason why I love reverse mentoring. This idea of CEOs being mentored by brand new graduates. It's just so powerful, because you then open up your perspective to worlds. And you mentioned it as well, like, men never realized that there were no women on the team. They just didn't even occur to them.
Right. So, and these are well-intended men. That's an important thing. Well-intended men can hold unconscious biases. So can women. Of course, we all have biases. We're human. But well-intended men can also have sometimes, acts that seem sexist or offensive. And it's just because our society for so long has permitted that, they just are not aware. And, more and more I have people, probably also because people know about the work that I do, my feminism, that type of thing. So people will say to me, please, if I say anything like, can I call you gal, or should I always say woman? Can I? And some people are more, is it offensive if I hold a door for you? And I said the other day, absolutely not. I don't find that offensive. I know you're not holding that door because you think I can't actually do it for myself. I know you're holding the door because it is a respectful act of kindness. And I do that for women and men also, right? Yeah. It's being conscientious and thoughtful. So I caution women that find that they get angry if a man offers to help with taking your suitcase off of, from the overhead bin or holding a door. I believe, and maybe this is just my age, but I believe those are acts of kindness and respect. And it's not, how do we view these things? Because that man was obviously well-intended. It wasn't saying, you're a weak woman, you can't take your bag out. I found sort of humor. Like the other day this happened to me and I said, you know what? That's the only upper body workout I'm going to get today. I can do it. Thank you. But I respected that. I wasn't angry. Like, no, I can do it. What do you think? I'm a weak woman, right? That could, because what is that doing?
I think that's the issue as well. Within female communities, we don't actually know what feminism is. There is no clear definition. Everyone's got their own version of what feminism is, and it's got completely skewed. And I just think we are going down wrong avenues on this discussion. And it kind of just needs to be recalibrated. And, you know, even just us having this conversation today brings, it's like a different conversation. It's raising awareness. It's having conversations that are not pro one gender and not the other. You know, it's just saying, can we just, that's why I love the fact that you're in media, because I think ultimately the most powerful tool will be through communication of these issues. No solutions need to be found, but we need to get people thinking differently, because it's become a mess.
Yeah, I agree. I agree very much. And I think we need to just be hopeful. I think we need to retain a sense of humor. But I think we also need to be empathetic. And I think empathetic is really what matters. Just for a second, put yourself in that person's shoes. What's it like to be the only person of color, or the only woman, or the one of few? You know, what does that feel like? Same thing for men. If a man is the only man in the room, you know, so I absolutely agree. And it's fun to talk about this with you. I don't have all the answers at all. But I think that there's a certain perspective that you gain from age and experience, and, you know, what works and what doesn't work. And I think about timing, tact, and tone, right? Like, when is it okay to call somebody out for their what seems like a bias versus, you know, just letting it go. And really, that's just an individual decision. And just being confident enough in yourself that you can take some of it in stride, and also know, you know, when you can just remind somebody that what they just said was actually could be taken as a sexist comment or as a degrading comment or whatever. And really, the interesting thing is whether or not it was intended that way, right? That was how it was. Is how it impacted me. But was that really their intention? I don't think getting angry is, I mean, yes, of course we get angry. We get frustrated with these microaggressions all the time. But I don't think lashing out is necessarily the answer. I think there's a more subtle way to get our point across. I think there's a more effective way to get our point across.
Yeah. And I think on that note, I will bring our conversation to a close, because the world is changing and our differences are dividing us at this current time. But I think we should all be heading towards trying to understand each other's differences, because through differences, we widen our perspectives, and that just makes for better solutions, whether that's in engineering and tech or in all sectors. And we do everything with kindness, and we do everything with an open-mindedness, and we try and see the good, because I think spotting differences is really just to lift ourselves up as individuals rather than seeing ourselves as a collective working together. So for women who will be watching this, I think it's really important to remind ourselves that it's okay to be amazing in several areas, and it's okay to be focused on just one area of life. But we need to do it with confidence and a real conviction in what we're doing, because when people are trying to drag us down, put us down, diminish us, we can say, this is what I want to be doing, this is how I want to be represented, and we go forward being our best selves.
Yeah. And also to understand that physiologically, women have less testosterone than men, women have more estrogen than men, and therefore we inherently are going to be less confident. That's nature, right? So understanding that that's okay, and we have to celebrate differences and realize what our differences bring to the table and how different perspectives can actually lead to, a better end goal, right? That's what's so important.
Yes, agreed. Robin, it's been so amazing to meet you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and experience and wisdom on this topic. I will put the link to your TED Talk in the comments. And for now, good luck with the documentary that you're doing. That's a whole other podcast. Maybe we can record one day.
Yeah.
What a topic, fertility.
I know, it's a big one. Well, Sheeny, thank you so much. Thank you for the work, the important work that you do.